You ever look at someone you love and just know something's wrong? You can't explain it. No proof, no evidence, just that gut-deep feeling that the person who promised to love you forever is lying straight to your face. That's where I was, back in the early 2000s, sitting across from my wife at dinner while she smiled, nodded, and quietly ripped our family apart behind my back. But here's the thing about me, I don't yell. I don't break plates. I plan. And when I finally learned the truth about her and her high school sweetheart, I made sure her lover lost everything. If you've ever dreamed of serving justice to someone who betrayed you, hit that like button, subscribe, and settle in. Because what started as heartbreak turned into one of the most brutal revenge stories you'll hear all week. Mantelpiece clock story begins. The distance between us. It started small. Little cracks in the rhythm of our life. My wife, let's call her Emily, had always been the steady one. She worked part-time at a local boutique, we had 2 young kids, 4 and 6, and most days, our life felt simple. Predictable. But around that time, I started noticing something different. She was always tired. She'd dress nicer on days she wasn't working. Makeup, perfume, that light pink lipstick I remembered from our college days. And our kids, bless their hearts, started talking about staying at grandma and grandpa's more often. Now, that wouldn't be weird on its own. Emily's parents were sweet people, but they lived over an hour and a half away. Yet somehow, she was taking the kids there too, sometimes 3 times a week. When I asked her why, she brushed it off. Mom's been lonely lately. Besides, the kids love it there. Fair enough, but it didn't add up. Not when the gas tank was draining faster than usual, or when she'd run errands and come back glowing, like she'd just stepped out of a movie scene instead of a grocery store. Something deep inside me, that animal instinct, told me I was missing something. Puzzle piece rising suspicion, miles and lies. Now, I'm not the jealous type. Never was. But I've also seen what infidelity does to families. My parents cheated on each other. The screaming, the broken plates, the hollow apologies that turned into silence. It wrecked my childhood. So yeah, I wasn't going to let that cycle repeat. I started small. Quietly. Every Monday morning, I wrote down her car's mileage in a little notebook I kept in my tool drawer. At first, nothing crazy. But after a few weeks, there it was, an extra 400 miles. Single. And those weren't work miles. She worked 10 minutes from home. That's when the numbness started to fade, replaced by something sharper, not anger, but clarity. If she was hiding something, I was going to find it. Laptop computer discovery, the note that changed everything. It happened on a random Thursday. She'd left for her part-time shift, and I sat down at our family computer to check emails. And there it was. A yellow sticky note, casually sitting beside the keyboard, with a single line written in her handwriting. Oh, password, Emsonshine76. I stared at it for a good 30 seconds. My heart pounded so loud it drowned out every logical thought. I knew it was wrong to invade her privacy. But I also knew, if I didn't, I'd never know the truth. So I typed it in. And there they were, dozens of emails. Most were innocent, until I found a chain between her and her old college best friend. And in that thread, my world cracked open. Scroll the confession in her own words. They were laughing, in writing, about how Emily had rekindled things with her ex-boyfriend from high school. She said things like, "He makes me feel alive again. He's not like my name, he actually listens. I can't believe how fat his wife's gotten, no wonder he misses me." My stomach turned. Not just from the betrayal, but from the cruelty. I printed those emails, every last one, and stashed them in a file under the sink, behind the cleaning supplies. But I wasn't done. I needed proof, not just words. Man detective enter Ron, the private investigator. I called a friend of mine who worked in law enforcement and asked if he knew anyone who could help me discreetly. That's how I met Ron, a former cop turned private investigator, calm voice, no nonsense, looked like he'd seen it all. I gave him everything I had, the emails, her schedule, the mileage notes. Within 2 weeks, he had a full report. Dates. Photos. It was all there. Emily would drop the kids at her parents', Meet her old flame, Bob, at a diner just off the highway, grab lunch, then spend a few hours in a cheap roadside motel before driving back to pick up the kids. She wasn't visiting family. She was visiting him. And every photo felt like a knife to the ribs. Broken heart, the breaking point. When Ron slid the manila folder across the table to me, I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just went silent. That kind of pain doesn't make you explode. It hollows you out. You sit there, realizing that every "I love you" for the past year has been a lie. That your kids' bedtime stories, your family dinners, they were all played out under a shadow you never saw coming. But I'm not my parents. I wasn't going to scream or beg. I was going to end it cleanly. And maybe, just maybe, teach a little lesson to the man who thought he could steal my wife and walk away unscathed. Balance scale, planning the payback. So I hired a divorce lawyer. Quietly. No confrontation, no drama, just precision. While the lawyer worked the paperwork, I asked Ron to dig deeper into Bob. Turns out Bob wasn't just some random fling. He was married with 3 kids of his own. He worked as a VP of sales for a business owned by his father-in-law. And the house he lived in? Also owned by his wife's parents. The man had built his entire life on borrowed ground. And I was about to strike a match. When you plan something like this, you learn the difference between heat and fire. Heat is the slow gnawing feeling under your ribs. Suspicion, the cold calculations you make at night. Fire? Fire is when you decide you'll let everything burn so the embers never lie. I'd already done the smaller things. The notebook with mileage, the sticky note on the keyboard, the printed emails shoved behind the cleaner spray. I'd hired Ron. I'd got the photos. I'd told myself I'd stay calm, that I'd be the reasonable one, that this would be about protecting my kids and not tearing someone else's life apart. But there's a point where protection becomes a promise to yourself. You will not be the only one who suffers for what someone else did. Compass, the plan falls into place. Serve, reveal, retreat. There are 2 truths everyone who's been wronged learns. Timing is everything, and humiliation is a currency most people can't afford. My lawyer told me how to proceed legally. Less drama at home meant stronger footing in court for the custody fight if it came to that. So I signed the divorce papers, paid the retainer, and kept everything quiet while the paperwork moved through. Then I called Ron with a different request. Talk to his wife, I said. It felt like asking someone to push the first domino. But Ron didn't blink. He called her, met her for coffee, and handed her the packet, the motel photos, the time-stamped lunch snaps, the email printouts where my wife and her friend laughed about how easy it was to meet. That part, at least, I told myself, was humane. Bob's wife deserved to know. She deserved the truth before being dragged into court drama or becoming the butt of some rumor. I thought maybe she'd already suspected something. Maybe she'd be the one to end it. I was prepared for any reaction, anger, tears, silence. I did not prepare for the way it would cascade, how people react when they're caught. There's a unique mix of disbelief and outrage you see on someone's face when their entire life has been exposed in detail. Bob's wife called me, not to yell, not at first, but to ask me things I didn't plan on answering. You didn't have to do this, she said, voice brittle. But, thank you. I needed to know. A few weeks later, everything started to fall apart for Bob the way I had always imagined in private, late-night fantasies, except it was worse than fantasy. Real life has a way of being crueler than your darkest imaginings. His wife walked. She left with the kids and a suitcase full of whatever she could grab in a hurry. She closed their joint bank accounts. She stopped talking to him. Her parents, remember, they owned the house, took his name off the lease. His father-in-law, who ran the company Bob was a VP in, took one look at the photos of his son-in-law sneaking into motels during the day and saw exactly what he needed to see. Within a month, Bob had been fired. People say losing a job is a blow to the ego. Losing a wife and job in the same week is a blow to one's entire identity. He tried to fight back. He called, he begged, he showed up at her parents' house drunk and loud. I didn't hear every word. I didn't need to. But I did hear the part about him getting his nose broken by her brother when the argument escalated. There were restraining orders, police reports, court filings, jail time for one violent night. When the dust settled, Bob was gone from town. His name disappeared from the company website. Social media had a gap in the chronology of his life like a missing tooth. I wasn't the one who publicly humiliated him. Ron and I had given the truth to the right people. They did the rest. Fire the day I served her paper. Sympathy, then steal. I could have delivered the divorce papers at home. I could have waited until after one more fight, one more glass of wine, one more trite apology. But there's a power in controlling the motion of an event, in deciding how someone learns they're losing everything. So I had Ron serve her at work. She was at the boutique, folding sweaters and smiling at the way a customer asked about the fit of a cardigan. When she saw the process server, she went white as a sheet. I stood outside in my truck, the engine quietly humming, like a heartbeat under my control. She didn't scream. She didn't yell. She took the papers, and for the first time since I'd walked into this life with her, I saw fear in her eyes. Not tears. Not contrition. Fear. That fear tasted of victory, and it tasted like survival too. Because I wasn't doing it to break her for the sake of cruelty. I needed to signal the boundary, that words would no longer protect her, that lies, once proven, would have consequences. Firecracker the moral line. Was I right to do it? People ask that a lot. Maybe you're asking it now. Is what I did justified? Did I set out to ruin someone's life for standing where they shouldn't? I'll be honest, part of it was about vengeance. That hot, animal part of me wanted him to know the same kind of public shame I'd felt in private. But there was another part, the part that remembers the slow poison of my parents' divorce, the kids who watched one parent leave and never understand why. I couldn't make my kids face that again. I wanted them to grow up in a household where promises had meaning. If the institution of family was going to be damaged anyway, I would at least make the damage proportional to the betrayal. And there's something else that quiets in you when you take the reins. A sense of justice. Not the legal kind, necessarily, but the human kind. A transaction. He took my wife and my sense of safety. He paid the price. If this sounds cold, I don't apologize. The cold is what kept me steady for my kids when the storm hit. Brain how I kept myself sane, the small rituals. While all this was happening, life still had to function. Someone had to get the kids to school. Someone had to sign the permission slips and clip their hair and put toothpaste on their toothbrush. I learned quickly that the human brain can split, one half burning with fury, the other performing the banal tasks of parenting like a professional actor. I spent evenings writing letters, not for court, not for the lawyers, but to myself. Short entries. Kids slept through thunder. Brought Parker to soccer practice. Stuff like that. It kept me grounded. When the courtroom came, I wore a plain suit and spoke only when necessary. I was precise, unembroidered. For every bile-filled imagination I'd had at 3 in the morning, I put one measured piece of fact on the stand. And through it all I watched my kids. The way my daughter braided her little brother's hair, the way they both asked for the same bedtime story they loved since they were 3. Those moments were my touchstone. That's why I did what I did, to preserve them. Hourglass on the aftermath. What happened to them and to me? People sometimes imagine revenge is a single moment. The press of a button and your life is restored. It wasn't like that. The consequences rippled. Bob lost his job, then his house, then his reputation. He lost access to his children. The man who once strutted in a suit and told jokes about quotas now had to explain to courts why his name belonged on no lease and why the bank accounts had been emptied. My ex, Emily, and I negotiated custody with the cold efficiency of 2 people who'd been in love but never spoke each other's language anymore. We split the time. The kids saw both of us. We kept things civil, functional even. People assume that's easy. It wasn't. It was meticulous emotional engineering. There were lines I refused to cross. I could have gone public. Exposed everything on social media. Turned it into a spectacle. I didn't. I wanted her to keep her dignity in front of our children. I wanted her to face consequences that had weight, not humiliation. In the end, she stopped being my wife. She became a person who would be there for our kids in separate ways. We spoke about birthdays, about schedules, about dental insurance, but never about the motel photos, the emails, the long lunches. And me? I slept when I could. I walked when I needed to clear my head. I dated, slowly, in a way that felt like learning to walk again after your leg's been in a cast. Adhesive bandage the long-term healing. You're not a villain for choosing your children. Years later, when the dust had settled and the kids were in high school, I ran into Bob's ex-wife at a local grocery. She gave me a look that said everything and nothing. Gratitude, maybe. Fatigue, definitely. We nodded like two people who'd been through a storm and come out wearing different coats. My kids grew up. They're adults now. They have their own routines. I don't hate my ex. I don't revel in Bob's ruin. Revenge tasted like medicine at first, bitter, necessary, but once you've swallowed it, you look for water. The lesson I keep telling people, and I'll repeat here because it's the only thing that made sense later, is protect the children first. Everything else falls in place when you do. If that means choosing strategies that feel harsh, do it deliberately. Don't let yourself be the person who acts only to vent. Make sure your actions serve a purpose beyond momentary satisfaction. There's a moment I remember clearly, and it still washes through me with a strange calm. It was the day Bob's final papers were filed. The courtroom was nearly empty. The fight had burned itself out into the gray monotony of paperwork. I walked out into the sun and felt it on my face, warm, ordinary, indifferent. My phone buzzed with a text, a photo of the kids at a baseball game, both of them laughing as if the world was still exactly as it should be. I sat in the car and I cried. I don't know if it was relief, grief, or a long-accumulated rage finally finding an exit. Probably all three. That's the thing about revenge. It doesn't end in a dramatic speech in front of an audience. For me, it ended in a car, with sunlight on my shoulders and two kids who would get to sleep in their beds without a stranger's outline looming over them. At the end of all this, I learned something simple and brutal. Betrayal is a private kind of war. You can't make everyone understand the small battles you fight in your head at 3 a.m. But you can make choices that protect what matters most. I chose to fight not for the thrill, but for my children. I chose to be precise, not performative. And yeah, I chose to make sure the man who thought he could take what wasn't his would pay in a currency he understood: loss. If that sounds harsh, maybe it is. But sometimes justice is not poetic. It's practical and it's necessary. If this story gave you chills, hit that like button and tell me in the comments, what would you have done in my shoes? And if you haven't already, subscribe for more real-life revenge stories where ordinary people take extraordinary measures to protect what they love. If you want a part 2, more detail on the legal side and exactly how Ron built the case against Bob, say the word and I'll bring you the receipts.